Hi everybody, welcome to day 4 of week 2 of our unit, Engaging with Our Community. Before we begin, let's do a quick overview of what today will look like. First, you'll have an opening and do now activity, then a before reading activity, which will be over these 3 slides. Then you'll go into the text and have an after the reading activity, and finally a closing and connecting. And teachers, note that for today's session, your closing and connecting can be whichever of the options works best for you and for your students. Also note that today's video will mostly facilitate our after the reading experience. And please remember that below in your notes for teachers, you're going to find some additional tips and suggestions for how to implement today's lesson. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so again, we are on day 4 of week 2 of our unit, Engaging with Our Community. And students, each activity that we're doing is building up to a final project for the next session, day 5. Our essential question is the same: how can where we live affect our health? And today, we're going to be looking again at our community health profiles. So at this point, can somebody please read out loud our lesson objectives here in the pink box? Teachers, you can pause this video and give students some time to read those out loud. Okay, thank you for reading our lesson objectives. Our first is to express ideas clearly with peers, building on the ideas of others. So we're working together with each other to add on to our ideas. Our second lesson objective is to demonstrate independence, selecting and applying words and phrases to aid expression. So you're going to be independently finding words, phrases, and vocabulary in English to help us express what we think. Teachers, at this moment, you can pause the video and facilitate the opening and do now activity, as well as the before reading. And remember, the before reading will take place over these 3 slides. On this slide, please remember to set the purpose for the day's reading and review the academic vocabulary with your students. When you pick this video back up, we will be going into the text. Okay, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed your before reading and opening do now. Again, the purpose for our into the text moment is to compare and contrast 2 sets of data that showcase the housing and neighborhood conditions in New York City. So we're looking at 2 different neighborhoods in New York City and what it's like to live there. For the into the text, you're going to open up your community health profile that's linked here and find the information from this table in that document. I'll show you what that would look like. So you select this link, it will open up the list of your community health profiles and find the one for your community. My community for my school is East Harlem, so I'll select that. And our focus today is housing and neighborhood conditions, which will be found on pages 9 and 10. So you'll scroll down to page 9. That's where you'll start to find the information for today's reading on pages 9 here and page 10. So teachers, at this moment, you can pause the video, have students open up the community health profiles and start to look for this information. And please don't forget your discussion questions here on the side. When you start this video back up, we will begin the after the reading activity together. Okay, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed looking over your community health profile. For the after the reading, we are going to be connecting what we learned to our community, and we are going to be comparing our communities to the Lower East Side and Chinatown, as well as all of New York City. We're going to look at some of the categories you just saw in the document, and then we are going to be writing what we think about all of this information. So I'm going to show you some of the specific steps you'll take to complete this task. Our first category is homes without maintenance defects, which means how many of the residents living in these neighborhoods do not report having problems such as holes in the walls, leaky water pipes, or mice and other pests in their apartment. So I know I have to find this information for the Lower East Side in Chinatown, my own school community, which again is East Harlem, and all of New York City. So let me focus on finding that information here. I'm going to open up the community health profile for the Lower East Side in Chinatown. I already have the one for East Harlem open. Go down to Manhattan and select the Lower East Side in Chinatown to open that document, and scroll down to page 9 where that information begins. Again, I'm looking for homes without maintenance defects, or who does not report having major problems in their apartment homes. It's going to be here on the bottom half of the page. For the Lower East Side in Chinatown, I see that the statistic they give me is 36%. 36%. So I'm going back to my table and I'm going to write in that statistic. 36% of residents of the Lower East Side in Chinatown do not have problems with their homes. I'm now going to the community health profile for East Harlem and finding the same information. Homes without maintenance defects, looking here, East Harlem. My statistic is 42%. 42%. I'll return to my table and write that in. So now I have left all of New York City. That can be found on either document. So I'll go back to the one for East Harlem. Here you'll see with the light blue color, this is for all of New York City. It says NYC. So that statistic is 44%. So in all of New York City, 44% of residents do not have major problems with their homes. So at this point, teachers, you can pause this video, and students, you'll take some time to find the statistic for your own community like I did here for East Harlem. You can copy down the statistics for the Lower East Side in Chinatown and all of New York City into your table because we already found them together. And when you start this video back up, we will do the second category. Okay, thank you. So the next category that we're going to look at is pedestrian injury, which means how many people in the neighborhood have an accident when they're walking and have to go to the hospital. So again, I'm going to look at my two community health profiles I have open. The first one is for the Lower East Side in Chinatown. The pedestrian injury section is on page 10. Page 10. It's up here at the top half of the page. Pedestrian injury. So I see my statistic for the Lower East Side in Chinatown is 20. So 20 people in the Lower East Side in Chinatown every year per 100,000 people have to go to the hospital because they have an accident when they're walking. So I'm going to write that statistic 20. I'm going to go to East Harlem and find the same statistic. For East Harlem, that number is 29 people per 100,000 people. 29 for East Harlem. Then for all of New York City, again, looking for my light blue section, NYC, which is all of New York City, that is 23, so writing that in as well. So at this point, teachers, you can pause this video, and students, you can look for that statistic for your own communities for pedestrian injury. You can copy down the information we found here for the Lower East Side in Chinatown and all of New York City into your table. After you complete the section for pedestrian injury, you can choose two other categories from the community health profile and find those statistics as well. And when you start this video back up, we'll be looking at how to write our comparison and contrast inferences. Okay, welcome back. We're going to do the last step of our activity, which is to write down our inferences for comparing and contrasting these neighborhoods. The word inference here just really means, what do you think about this information? So let's use the category homes without maintenance defects. Let's look and see what we think based on these statistics. And we can use some vocabulary to help us with our writing. So when we talk about our thoughts, our inferences, we can say something like, I think that, or this makes me think that. We can also use some vocabulary to talk and describe the different neighborhood conditions. More, less, safer, more dangerous, similar, or different. Looking between these three neighborhoods for the homes without maintenance defects, I'm thinking because the Lower East Side in Chinatown has fewer people who say they have no problems, which means they have more people who do have problems, that maybe the housing conditions for the apartments are not as safe there as with East Harlem and all of New York City. So if I wanted to write that thought down, I would use some of my vocabulary. I think that the Lower East Side and Chinatown has more dangerous apartments than East Harlem and New York City. So again, I use the vocabulary here to write down my thought that the Lower East Side in Chinatown, because of this 36%, which is lower than East Harlem and all of New York City, it tells me that more people have problems with their apartment there, and it might be more dangerous. So at this point, teachers, you can pause this video. Students, you can continue writing down your compare and contrast inferences for each of the categories that you chose here. When you finish that, you'll go on to the closing and connecting, and then we'll see you for day 5.